lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Manny.
And we are going to be talking about not only a book that I really dug, but a character that I've liked for a long time. We're talking about Jonah Hex, and we're talking about Two Gun Mojo by Joe Lansdale and Tim Truman. This is something that I think I kind of vaguely knew about. Yeah, you got the singles.
Yeah.
I vaguely knew about this series just from probably seeing covers at some point in time, you know?
It was always around. I remember as a kid, like when I got into comics, like I think it was pretty hyped for Vertigo at the time because I remember seeing like articles on it, like in I think maybe Wizard or
Probably.
or Comic Scene, which was another magazine I used to read a lot because I distinctly remember seeing images from this in some kind of promotional like way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure, but like I was aware of it enough as a kid reading comics without even having read any Vertigo comics and knew that it was something different, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Kind of
look, I love Vertigo. Vertigo is, I still say it's like my favorite. If it was its own publisher, it would be in my top 3 publishers of all time. And it would be floating around kind of like in the top 2 because I just love it from beginning to end, even though at the end I think there was kind of like it wasn't what it once was. There was still a couple like gems that would come out from that run or from that imprint. Like I said, I love Jonah Hex. I don't remember what my first introduction was. I feel like he was in the original Batman animated series.
He was. There was an episode
Okay. So
that was actually written by Joe R. Lansdale as well.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that must have been my first intro to the character.
Okay.
Obviously, like I've always been a DC fan, so but I didn't like get any of the comics until much later. I love Westerns. We've talked about it on our Preacher videos, which I guess only one of those is dropped as of the time that we're recording this, but we have multiple videos in the bank.
Yeah.
So like this was a glaring kind of hole to me in my collection that I had never read it. You know, I don't know what kind of woke me up into finally buying it recently, but I bought it like a couple months ago and it was in my pile for stuff that I wanted to talk with you about. And finally, I'm just like, I need to read this. And then I messaged you and I was like, can we do this next week? Because I was getting anxious of looking at it on my shelf and not reading it. I was very surprised. I don't know. I guess I didn't know what to expect from this book, you know, like, because it's not the Jonah Hex I'm used to. It's a completely different take on the character. But I really loved it, and obviously, like Tim Truman is an artist that, you know,
the art is amazing, man. And this, I mean, the covers are fantastic. Like so much of it is so good.
Yeah, and I'm just getting into Tim Truman in the last like 2-3 years. You know, like during the pandemic is when I really became aware of him. You know, with like the Dragon Chain book that he did that was on the Kayfabe channel, and then I picked up some Grimjack that he did with Ostrander. I just recently read his Hawk World book that he did, which that book was so good, and that was another book. So I've known about his stuff. I just didn't read Scout. You know, I picked up some of that, and I've just become such a huge fan of him as a creator. So that's kind of what like really made me finally pick up the book. And Joe Lansdale does such a great job. Like this is not what you would think, because I don't know if Jonah Hex is not a superhero, you know, but he's and everything I've he's never been written in this way.
No, he hasn't. I mean, I think there's always been an element of like the weird sort of Western, which is almost a genre unto itself, like with Jonah Hex. And I know there was a take on him too, I think right before this might have come out, like in the Bronze Age or where he was like post-apocalyptic, and I haven't read any of those. So you know, he's always been on the fringe. But you're right, like this sort of like straight dive into horror that this book takes was a new take for the character, and also the mature aspect was a new take for the character also. And this is a great period for Vertigo, man, because this is when Vertigo was just starting to form as its own imprint and like
look, I mean this is 93. This is the first year. 93 is when they started, so this is year 1 of Vertigo. Well,
so like the trade dress and like the paper stock and everything was so good at the time, you know, like the Vertigo books from the early 90s have a very distinct feel to it, and like this to me is like one of the best
they have examples. A distinct smell. Even the trade has a distinct smell.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because I have a couple of Hellblazer trades from that era, and they do have a specific feel to it.
I know it sounds weird to people like watching or listening to us, but it has a Vertigo smell. I don't know how else to
Yeah,
describe it. It's like the trades in the comics smell different.
but a little bit of background on Joe Lansdale. He's not typically a comic book writer, although he's written a bunch of comics
Sure.
in the past, short stories and stuff like that. He's primarily a crime and horror writer, kind of like a Southern Stephen King, if you will. His stuff always sort of blends genres together, which is why I think you see that here, where it's like the horror and the western. He's also a big comic book fan, Joe Lansdale, so I'm not surprised he wrote this. But this this is one of two Hex miniseries that he did, because he did one right afterward, I think, called Riders of the Worm and such, which I haven't read. I have a few random issues, but again, that was the same team, him and Tim Truman. And another little side note too, they also did a Lone Ranger series, which is very much in vein with this like
This whole
sort of
creative
weird
team?
look. I have some of those too. That it was for Top when was trying to make comics like in
Oh,
the
weird. I
90s.
haven't even heard of that book. Okay.
Yeah, there was like a 4 issue, like the adventures of like of the Lone Ranger and Tonto, and it's Tim Truman, Joe Lansdale, and again, it has like a horror vibe to it too, like a mummy, and it's really cool. If I can dig up the issues, I'll look through them again, and I think you'd be surprised at finding out how cool that was. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting, strange tale that has some off-putting humor.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he's going after this like zombie fucking cowboy, right? And
Yeah,
then it's a whole freak show, like that's like traveling freak show. This one of this, I guess, villain or the
yeah.
antagonist of the book.
Slogo Smith. I also like Lansdale brings in a lot of like actual like history kind of into this, because like
Sure.
there's like the mention of like of Wild Bill Hickok, like the whole snake oil salesman sort of thing. It just a period in American history where like you had these men that would travel around like claiming all sorts of things, and and it became a big part of culture. Like I think they mentioned Deadwood in here, so like it's a fantastical story, but like Lansdale is also someone that like kind of likes to ground his stuff in a little bit of reality to give it, I guess, time and place,
Sure.
and he does that here too.
Yeah, because it's weird. Like it does have supernatural elements, but it
Yeah, yeah,
feels very grounded, which is weird to
it
say,
does.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, like it's. I think a lot of that has to do with like the way that Truman draws this, because like there's a lot of detail and grit,
It's a very
and
cinematic style that Truman
yes,
has too. Like I love like stuff like this, like him fucking
yeah.
through the air with the cow on the horse, and then you have him with the Native American that breaks him out of the jail cell. And I love that moment too. Like, I mean, I know I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I'm just trying to like. There's just some of the moments that really stood out. Like as they're escaping, like she gets shot right in the back,
Oh,
and
the one who helped him, yeah,
yeah, and then this, oh,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty gory and violent at times.
it is,
Oh,
but
I
it's
also
not.
want to point out how nice the covers are amazing. But Vertigo was always killing it with covers.
I know I loved it because they had like a specific like trade dress, with like the Vertigo logo, and then it would be like, I mean, I guess you can't really see it here, but it'd be like a bar going down the side.
Yeah,
You could probably see it
yeah,
better on your comics, but
yeah. It's very like it's very hard to see unless you hold it under the light, but it's there. That's what I meant by the trade dress. But there's a lot of great coloring in here too.
yeah.
I guess the color artist is Sam Parsons. Don't know the name, but the color definitely, it's like colorful, but there's still like a lot of mutedness to like the.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's to me, it's kind of like the way Creature's colored.
Dude, like
A
that
lot of
you
warm,
mentioned.
a lot of warm colors.
Yes, yes, and you mentioned Preacher earlier, and one thing I wanted to mention when we were recording after reading this is I don't think it's a coincidence that Lansdale is the guy that wrote the intro to the
For
first
volume one,
Preacher
yeah.
graphic novel, because I see this as an influence on Preacher as a comic too. Like there's certain things about the way it's written, like these quotes on the back, like that's something that Ennis did a lot with Preacher specifically, like with the Saint of Killers. So I feel like Ennis must have read this and been like, man, like maybe I can do my weird ass Western comic at Vertigo. Like I don't know for sure, but I'm putting puzzle pieces together, and it makes sense because like this, if you like Preacher, I could see you liking this series too. It sort of has some of the same offbeat humor, like the same weird characters. Obviously, the Western vibe, almost like a proto Preacher over here.
Definitely. I definitely was getting those vibes as I was reading it. And I love these little like elements. He his friend Slogo Smith gets fucking shot and he drags him around. He finds him in a pile of trash and then he puts him on the back of his horse and he's just fucking riding with him horseback to go get him like a proper burial, but he's just like sitting there with like bullet holes, flies flying around his fucking dead body. And like I love the way they, there's certain moments where, he fought in Gettysburg. It talks about that, right? And like when he goes to
Yeah,
that father son thing, and like he's asking for what is he asking for? A horse and something else, right? And they don't, at first they don't let him know, like they don't show that they know who he is, right? But in the end,
right.
that's why they help him, right? They look at him like that. We know you're not who they say you are. We know that we've seen the wanted signs. And they give him the gun and they give him the horse, which he ends up losing. It really is a good companion piece to Preacher because these came
Yeah,
out like within like a couple of years of each other. I think Preacher was 95. So and then you're saying there's
yeah,
a second miniseries, which I would imagine was in 94. And
yeah. I
like
think so.
it flows
It
really
was pretty. It
nicely.
was, yeah, because this was a hit at the time. I mean, I don't think it was on the level of like Sandman and Hellblazer, which were popping, but Vertigo was like releasing a lot of shit around this time. Like
Yeah.
they had found their identity, so they were like trying to publish as much as they could to get all this stuff out there, and this one was definitely a hit. And Lansdale is not like a huge name in the way that like Stephen King is or something, but like in like people that like horror novels and crime novels know his name. So I think him writing a comic was like not like a New York Times headline, but I think it was news making.
Of
So
course. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
agree. I mean, back then a lot of it was more writer focused too.
yes,
At a
yeah,
time when you look at other publishers and it was more artist driven. This is a more writer driven imprint at DC. Obviously, not to take anything away from the artists, because the artists that
right.
they had were phenomenal too. But
Right.
it
And I
was
mean, and as
definitely,
good as the story is, I don't think this book would work without the Truman art. The Truman art is such a big part of this book. Like,
yeah. Well, he does like this genre, and like I mean, look at Scout, right? Like that's such a
yeah,
great book, and like he does this gritty, grounded like realism that you do like. There's just something
and
about it, dude. He sells these kind of stories, and he can take a story where like Hawk World, where it's a dude. I know I'm jumping to a different book, but it's a dude with fucking wings, and it felt
yeah.
grounded. You know, and I'm like, my
I mean,
God, dude, this is so
he's
good.
great. Like, look at this page. I
I was
keep
gonna
flipping
mention
to
that,
this. I love this page. Like, I love anytime that there's like these long like panels like going down, and it's just like
and I love that
it
it just
it
draws your eyes.
exactly like look at the way the figure moves diagonally, ending with the splash. Like it's a master executing his craft, man. Like he's great. And like Tim, this was probably like the height of his popularity too, where he was involved in so many titles and sort of like going from like you said, like the Scout comics and like the Grimjack, like when he was working for First Comics and whatnot, to like more mainstream. But I also want to say, I recall, because I went through a period where I was really into Joe Lansdale, so I would read a lot of interviews with him. And if I remember correctly, he always intended for Truman to be the artist on this, because I think he was a fan. And when he pitched the project to DC, I think he was like, I want Tim Truman, which makes sense because like I think in almost everything that Lansdale has been involved in, comic book wise, and he's had like a couple of his short stories adapted at Dark Horse. Truman has always been involved somehow, whether it's doing like a cover or like actually penciling the story. Like there's always an involvement there. So like it just shows you that like this is a very good creative team. And even if this had been the only thing they ever did together, it would be fantastic. The only crime I see is like I don't think this is currently collected. I think the collection you have is probably out of print, and I pulled mine out of dollar bins.
This collection is from '94. Yeah.
And I see them in the dollar bins a lot. So I always recommend people grab them with this one or the follow up story. I think there might have even been a third that I'm
I
unaware
think
of.
there's a third. I'm
Yeah, I
pretty
think there
sure
was
because
a
I
third that I
remember
never read. Yeah.
there was a set on eBay that I because when I was looking for it, obviously like that's the first place I looked because I'm like to try to find this trade would be hard, or to try to find these issues is going to be some work, and I was itching to read it. So I'm pretty sure there was a third miniseries, and I think Tim Truman's on all three. I think it's I mean I don't know.
Yeah,
It
I
was
believe so too. He's
I
definitely on the second one because I have like at least three of those issues.
yeah.
I'll have to look and find the third one because I like I've never even seen a single issue.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm definitely gonna go pick up those other. I'll get the trades obviously when I can find them. But I
I
just
keep looking at I love the cover of issue
I
one
know
so much.
the covers are just phenomenal, dude. And it's funny because
Yeah.
it's like I mentioned westerns. Western I think like besides maybe the 50s, I don't think West in the maybe the 40s, Western was not a genre that I think did very well in comic books past
No,
those decades. Maybe a little bit of the 60s. I could be wrong there. You don't see them anymore, right? Like it
no.
seems to not work. So I wonder if like, we talked about Preacher having a different element, but it's also Western, right? Like Western noir, kind of modern. And then is this how Lansdale and Truman were able to pitch this? Is because they added that supernatural element.
It could
It made
be.
me think about that because it's kind of like when Kirkman pitched Walking Dead. They didn't want to do a zombie book, so he's like, "Oh yeah,
Right.
it's aliens that did it," and
And
then
then there never was. Yeah.
he lied. Yeah, he
Listen,
lied. He just wanted to get the book made, and so I wonder if that was a little bit of what he was going for here in terms of getting it done. Because I mean, there's a dude with a fucking pumpkin head. This dude that's like that throws him into this like fucking vat and is like filling him with like liquid, like this liquid to kind of make him be under mind control. And he's got the rest of his fucking, I guess like the freaks or whatever. I mean, it's just like
yeah,
it's
it's
a
like a freak
very
show almost. Yeah.
yeah, it's just a very weird collection of people, and what he's trying to do to Jonah Hex is just very strange, But I love, when you get the backstory of the villain and of the book, it's just funny, dude, because he calls himself like a wizard, but he like all I can think of is like, yeah, if I saw this dude walking in, I'm like, what is up with this fucking weirdo, dude? Like, you're not what the hell's a wizard, especially at this time, right? Like it's
Yeah,
in the
exactly. Like
1800s.
the word wizard was probably not like in the popular culture in the old west.
And after he kills him and he fucking turns him into a zombie, he's just like he's having him bathe him. Fucking
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just I
It's
love this. And when Jonah Hex finally escapes, and then obviously you showed those panels. But I love this too, the sequence right after that when he's coming out of the water and he grabs a snake and he talks about his Apache friends, or the Comanche, I'm sorry, the Comanche, and how they would have disowned him for doing that. And that's when he meets the father's son.
this last fight is also so good here at the end. Like just like that series of panels with the shootout.
Yes.
Like you
Yeah,
said, it's very cinematic, man. It's very cinematic and like the panel to panel like progression is really good.
I think the coloring is such a huge aspect of it too, because
I really, really, really focus on the coloring in this reread.
if
Like the colors really jumped out at me.
if the like imagine if it was, to me, look, if it was colored digitally, I think it might feel different. Or if it was
Mhm.
just like different shades of color, like the like I said, the warmth of it gives it that Western feel.
That yeah, you nailed it with that word warmth because there is a although it's colorful, it's not like bright or poppy. Like it's warm, like you
Yeah.
said. You know, like
Oh,
there's
there's always like a kind of sunset kind of feeling to it. You know what I
yes,
mean?
yeah, a dusk, like you know that like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Pouring
love it.
over
Like
these pages. It's such a good
yeah,
book.
like this is beautiful. Also,
Oh, that's a page I'm on right now. Yeah.
just the lettering and like the close ups of Hex's face.
And I love
It's a crime
this.
that they haven't collected
And I
this because
love
I
this
mean, I
too when he has to light the fucking horse on fire so that he can get it to move to where he needs it to. And then when he comes back up on Hickok and he's fucking like cooking human flesh.
oh yeah, yeah.
It's
They
fucking
got like
creepy.
a torso like lying there.
Yeah, dude, he's like, afternoon, gentlemen, hate to spoil your dinner. And then he fucking just goes to town, dude. He fucking starts like taking him out. I love this too, the shot where he like leans back.
Yeah. Yeah. The zombie is Wild Bill Hickok, which is like an actual historical figure. So
Yeah, see, I didn't even know that. I mean, I'm not super versed in like
yeah, he's like one of these like real like old west people that over the years has been mythologized, and like the real Wild Bill is probably nothing like what I think he was because of the stuff I've read, but he definitely is like like Wyatt Earp or something, like one of these people that the name always pops up when you talk about that period.
and I love the way even the way it ends, dude. Like he's in the bar, couple guys fucking like about to cock their guns, and Hex just fucking shoots. Anyone else? And then he's just like, all right, that's good. And then he takes off. And then rides off into the sunset. It's such a good fucking ending, dude.
Yeah, and then it's got the quote. Like I said, these are the little touches that I feel that were like an influence on Preacher. Like those little storytelling techniques. Like I think the humor, obviously, it's a
And
great take on Jonah Hex, and like to me, like it seems like a no brainer to sort of have him as this sort of weird, horror aligned character, because he's a very bizarre looking character to begin with. Like scarred, like
fucking inside of his mouth is always exposed, like you can see it from the side. And they don't he has that look to him, but it's not as extreme as some artist
right.
depiction of him. So it's like it feels a little
It,
more believable that he could have that on his face, because sometimes you see the way they draw him and you're like, that dude would constantly have an infection in his
Right,
fucking
yeah, because his
mouth.
freaking jaw
It's
exposed
just
and all that.
exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This seems a little bit more real, like you said.
Yeah. But no, I think it's great. I think it's a crime it's not in print. I think, like Manny said, if you can find these in dollar bins, like scoop them up. If you see these out of print trades,
I mean,
scoop
it's
them
a
up.
Truman art, dude. Like, the more I look at it, like the more I start to see like how Truman has influenced so many people. Like, I even see like now I see like Truman's influence on like Ed Piskor for some reason. Like I really see it like in the way that he draws the faces. Like this is top level Tim Truman art. So yeah, definitely grab this if you see it. It's a shame that this isn't in print still and readily available.
Yeah. But I'm glad we decided to talk about it on the channel. I know mostly we were just talking about the themes of the book. We didn't really get too much into the story, but it's such a it's to me it was almost kind of hard to explain exactly the story, because it's
It's
not written like a normal comic book. It's not your regular comic book, and
no,
and
and
that's
and
not
that's
to say
the
it's bad.
I've always said that about Lansdale because, like I said, he's one of my favorite writers. He writes a series of crime novels about these characters. Happen Leonard, they made a show about it a few years ago. Like, but when you said it's hard to describe his plots, and that's very true because all his books, like the plots are almost preposterous at one point. But what Lansdale is great at, and he does it here, is creating atmosphere and like character, and he nails that.
Yeah.
Like he really gives the character like a personality that comes off the page, and that's really his strong suit. And in a lot of ways, it's like he almost makes Jonah Hex like his own. Like
Yeah.
I feel like this version of Hex was so good that people are still pulling from it whenever they write Hex now, and like ever since then, Hex has always been now kind of a weird Western character. Like and they really probably goes back to this.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to scoop up those other ones, and we'll probably
Yeah,
talk about those too eventually. But go pick them up, go check them out. You're not going to be disappointed. And make sure you follow us. Our links are down below, and hit the subscribe button, the bell icon, so you're notified every time a new vid goes up. And on that note, we're out.